session, DESI requires us outside of 3 miles to transport our children to and from school. And this one concerns me a lot too, especially if we spend $2 million for transportation. The state funds it at $900,000, and let's say they cut it $450,000, or let's say they cut it entirely. So when we discuss, well, what would it look like if we pushed ours out? Because right now, outside of a mile, we transport. If we push it to 1.25 miles, or we push it to 1.5, or we pushed it to 2. In your packet, on page 11, this generates a lot of concerns. It's one of those areas where you can plan on a probably categorical cut. This year, they told us they were going to fund it at 52%, and that never came through. Luckily, Shelley, in her conservative budgeting, and her colleagues said, I don't believe that's going to happen. And sure enough, about a month ago, they said, guess what? You're not getting your money. It's going to be funded at the same amount it was last year, which is 47%. So when I look at the students affected by bus routing, if we were to push it out 1.25, that would be a savings to the district of $243,000. That eliminates 6 buses, which impacts 917 students. And you're going, okay, wait, 6 buses and 70 kids on a bus. How can that be? Because I did the same thing. That is because we have 2 runs, the elementary run and the secondary run. So we also would have to think about safety on parking lots and getting people to school, and how do you get those additional kids to school, and attendance and graduation rates and student achievement. So those are all barriers. 1.5 expanded out impacts 1,264 kids. That's a savings of $365,000 for the district. And 2 mile push out is 1,700 kids impacted at $405 or $1,000. And it impacts, the high school would have a 33% impact in terms of kids. Middle school 15, West 7%. So those additional cars, you know, is a thought process. But I think it's real important for the community to know how much we spend on transportation. And as a matter of fact, you look at per pupil, we spend more for transportation than we do for instruction. And that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And that's a problem that the state doesn't seem to recognize. So I just wanted you to understand, because I was struggling to get to the bottom line number. So that's why it's there. And reducing the PAT budget, this is one that wasn't on my radar at first, and I know we had some discussion about it, but just recently, although they originally said that PAT could be spared because they received a 10% cut last year, it's now in appropriations that they may see a 14% cut. And operationally, 50% of what we spend to operate outside of what they get reimbursed for is 36.6. We also have one reduction of about 0.5 preschool. We need to really think about that preschool building. Right now we have 10 students there. We have interest of 4 to 5 students for next year. That's a pretty low load to operate that building. So we are going to cut the 0.5 preschool, but we need to also consider what we'd like to do in the long term with that building, and that might be a revenue generating entity. Volunteers and subs, this one concerns me a little bit. Currently, the district pays for the background check for substitutes, new employees, and volunteers. And we're requiring volunteers to do background checks every year. And for safety, I mean, you just don't know what is out there. So I think we actually need to have a plan to have background checks. But I don't know that we can put the bill for volunteers and subs anymore. And subs are required. by the way, by DESI, by the state. But volunteers, we might be able to think outside the box and do a background check. It's a $13 check. 1 year, the next year do the name check, the next year do the background check to help them on the costs associated with that, or identify times when they would need to have a background check. Some of our folks probably do the background check and they don't even go to a field trip or volunteer at all. Some of them might just attend one thing. So we'll need to think about how we want to handle that to ensure the safety of our kids, to think about the expense to the volunteer, because I don't want to lose our volunteers. We got some great ones. So let's think about that.